This is the Analysing Anfield podcast on the Blood Red channel, bringing you the best tactical and statistical analysis of Liverpool FC.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm joined by David Hughes. Dave, how are we getting on?
I'm very good, thanks mate. Well, as good as can be, you know.
How's the wig?
It's getting long, you know. I don't want to bring this kind of regular topic from last year back into the new year, but I'm getting a little bit concerned because it's coming up to 8 weeks since I've had my haircut and feels like it's happening all over again. So yeah, that's the one downside. I'm struggling to keep it in any sort of shape at the moment. So I might have to find a haircut on the black market, I think.
Listen, it's relevant, when it's relevant, we will talk about it in this podcast. It's important. What else is important is Liverpool's current situation. Liverpool's current situation isn't actually too different to when we last spoke. I've only played once, and it was in one of the domestic cups against a gang of kids as well. So Liverpool's situation isn't that different. The league situation is, because Liverpool are now in second place. We are recording on the Wednesday before anyone else plays. But Manchester United last night leapfrogged Liverpool by 3 points. Big news. First time it's happened, it feels like, in a long time. And funnily enough, it's happened in the same week that Liverpool actually face United for the first time this season at Anfield on Sunday. So it's quite a big one, this big podcast previewing the game. That's all we're going to talk about this episode. So, you know, it might be shorter. We'll see where we go with it. Just before we do, I'd like to quick word on the newsletters. We haven't mentioned the newsletters for a while. Analysing Anfield newsletter was migrating over to a new platform over the course of the Christmas period. It's there now. I've sent out one or two since. The last one that I sent out was on the whole centre-back thing. And for some reason, that ended up in my junk mail. I'm not really sure why. So if you're wanting to receive Analysing Anfield newsletters, if you've signed up and all that sort of stuff, maybe check your junk just in case it's gone there. I will be sending one out this week on Thursday on Bruno Fernandes and Man United, and, you know, previewing an aspect of the game. And Dave, Analytic 5, I'm not sure if you want to plug in quickly.
Yeah. Just it goes out twice a week now, Tuesday, Friday. Go onto Analytics 5 Twitter and just sign up for free there. You know, I won't keep too much of the airwaves, but it's good and people enjoy it.
Yeah, straight into Man United then.
Yeah.
We appear to have a title race. Dave, what are your general thoughts on United from a distance without going too detailed just yet? What are your thoughts on United and their ability to maybe win this title ahead of Liverpool?
Yeah, it's you know, I suppose at this stage, I'll caveat initially and say it seems to be an ever-changing landscape at the top. You know, there's a few teams that we've kind of tipped to be there or thereabouts, and then they very quickly drop off. I think two of those teams have been Tottenham and Chelsea so far this season. I'm not writing either of them off, but, you know, at one point they looked legitimate, then they didn't again, and now they're somewhere in between. I'd say in terms of United, you know, you have to take them seriously because irrespective of, you know, performance indicators, which I'm sure we'll come on to later in the episode, so I won't go too much into now. But if you look purely at results and points accumulated, you know, at this stage of the season, they've accumulated the most. It's that simple. And as I said, irrespective of what the performance indicators are saying, you know, they have got the most points on the board so far. So they've got a really good platform to enter this second half of the campaign. I think and something that is really crucial from their perspective that maybe gets overlooked by some is there's a little bit of growing belief in their camp now, which I think is a big factor. You know, the psychological side of things. It does seem like they can kind of go into any game and believe they can win. You know, the acid test, I guess, is Anfield this week because nobody's gone and won there in, what is it, 3 years, is it?
Yeah.
It's a long time anyway, probably come up to about 70 games now. So that's the acid test. But yeah, I think there's growing belief and there's points on the board, and for that reason, you take them serious.
I mean, I must admit, I didn't think they would be here. I think since they signed Bruno Fernandes, who we will get to, they have been. It's felt like they've been coming. They have been climbing, gaining a little bit of ground and all that sort of stuff, but not strengthening in the summer, or not appearing to strengthen really where they needed to and stuff like that. I just thought they'd kind of fall off and then kind of suffer a little bit from that, and they wouldn't make that final step that they needed to climb over Liverpool and City. But I'm actually going to give a little bit of credit here to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because I think the way in which he's managed the squad has been. I do think he can manage a squad, Solskjaer, and I think the way he's been given, odd player profiles like Pogba, and he's got Van der Beek there now. He's got Cavani, who came in a less than ideal deal. The way he's used each player, it is delivering points, and I think courtesy of our producer who mentioned this before you actually joined the call, Dave. United are the only team in the league this season to be averaging over 2 points a game. I wasn't actually aware of that. They're averaging 2.12 points per game, and the second best is Liverpool on 1.94 points per game. Usually, most seasons you'll get a few teams maybe averaging over that figure. I'll double check now what it was last season, but yeah, I think it's one of them campaigns whereby anything can happen really, and the margins are finer than usual. We've mentioned this a few times now, the past few weeks, and I just think United have made use of that more so than any other team. They've scored a few late winners, a few comebacks, benefiting from penalties, of course. And it's delivered results, and the results it's delivered in seasons gone by still wouldn't be enough to even be close to the top. But this season, it is.
Yeah, I agree. It's I think what's really important is as well. You're talking about the squad management there. I think Solskjaer's rotated the side really well through a difficult period. The festive period is tough every year. This year in particular, it's been difficult. But if you look at basically from that the Leipzig defeat, where they obviously crashed out the Champions League, they've only lost one game since the beginning of December, and that was against City in the League Cup. But they played City in the league in that time. That was a 0-0 draw. But they've had some tough games in that period, and they've come out with big points, big wins, and I said that does just breed this mentality that potentially they're there for the long haul. They're going to go all the way to at least challenge come the end of the season.
Yeah, I've just a little check back to the 2017 season, up until now, and each season there's at least two teams with an average points per game of over 2 points. In the 2017-18 season, there's three. This season, obviously, as I said, there's only one. That's Man United, and they're not comfortably over the 2 point per game mark. They're only finally over it. Looking at 538 prediction model, so this is a statistical predictor as to the likelihood of each team winning the Premier League. Man United currently on 12%. Liverpool 15%, and Manchester City 67%, which seems very, very, very in favour of Guardiola's team. But I think just based on the underlying numbers, I think the 538 model has always liked Manchester City, hasn't it?
Always tips City every year. It was tipping City about January last season, wasn't it?
yeah. And if you look at Understat. So Understat have got a bit of an expected points type column in their table. Liverpool should be top at the minute with 32 points expected, that is. But that's obviously City have got 2 games in hand. Man United should be on about 28 points. So according to Understat, Man United are currently overperforming their points by about 7 or 8. Which is the second most or third most in the league. The only two teams who will overperform their points by more than that are Southampton and, I'm sorry, Dave, Everton. So that type of thing does sometimes suggest that regression is on the cards. But Liverpool have been overperformers for the past few years. Like last season, Liverpool overperformed by 24 points, which suggests that they're doing something beyond what the model's picking up on to get these wins.
Yeah, this is just on that point. Sorry, this is something that I think is often missed by people who rely so heavily on expected metrics. They're really good indicators, but at the end of the day, they're not exact science, and they do have kind of blind spots. And I think a key thing there is, we use Liverpool the example, like they have overperformed, but they've got elite players in the squad, especially in attack. And for me, so have Manchester United. They've got really good forward players. Players like Fernandes who are really good from distance, and so these things can kind of really assist you in overperforming. But Josh, you say it a lot. You're only as good as your players, aren't you? If you think of like a team like Brighton who show up really well on the expected metrics, but obviously don't convert that as well into points because they don't convert at a high enough rating things. Whereas United are the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of my favourite phrases. That one, only because your players. But one aspect of the table that I like to look at goal difference quite a lot. I think that's quite generally a good indicator as to where a team's going to end up at the end of the season. Liverpool are currently top of the goal difference table, plus 16. Then there's a group of teams. Man United are 6th, I think. Yeah, 6th for goal difference, plus 10. They're currently on at the moment. So it just suggests that maybe they're not winning games to the extent that Liverpool are. Maybe they're scraping over the line a little bit more. Still on the positive, of course. And the expected goal difference table, Liverpool plus 13.1. Man United, again, much lower down, about 5th on plus 6.3. And if you look at the expected goal difference per 90, you got Liverpool and City out in front, then a little bit of a gap to Villa and Chelsea, and then another gap to teams that are a bit more normal, and Man United lead that normal group. What that kind of indicates is the difference in performance between Team A and Team B. If Liverpool, Man City are top plus 0.82, that's the biggest difference between Team A and Team B performance-wise, excluding refereeing decisions, excluding luck and all that sort of stuff. But Man United aren't really winning the performance to such a level comparable to Liverpool and Manchester City, that is. And that sort of thing just suggests that, further down the line, maybe when things aren't really flying for them, they're not getting rubber green as much. Their performances are kind of taking care of the results a little bit less than Liverpool's are and City's are. And that you generally need that over the course of a 38-game season. I say to you quite often, don't I, Dave, that sometimes I say it in FPL terms, but the season is long, and we have to remember, don't we, that we're only 17 games in.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, basically everything that's happened so far, and it already feels like a bit of a slog in many ways. You've got all that to go again. So a lot of conclusions seem to be drawn at the halfway point here, but there is a lot of football to be played. There's not necessarily going to be a settled schedule either playing it. As we've seen, there's fixtures getting cancelled and having to squeeze fixtures in, changes of opponents. It's not going to be smooth sailing from this point. So it's definitely, the way I see Manchester United now, I see them as maybe a top 4 or 5 team. But they've had things go in their favour that have tipped the results more towards the win column. Games where it's been in the balance. Yeah, and they could have quite easily gone the other way if things panned out a little bit differently. I think for United, it's been panning out in their favour. Which does happen. It's just, what I keep saying though, I tried to allude to this point at the start of the show. what I keep saying is that, but a lot of that's, you know, been and gone now. And sometimes when it is kind of in the balance a little bit, it can be luck, but they've accumulated those looking parts and they've got the points on the board now. And it'll just be interesting to see how the next stage, you know, the second half of the season goes, whether they can now build upon that or there will be regression, in line with some of the performance indicators.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. I think when it comes to the actual performance of a team, you know, as a unit and basically being better than your opponents, I don't actually think United have that much on their side. I think I'd agree that they're around, you know, maybe fourth, maybe third to sixth, in and around that comfortably. Not even close to Liverpool and City. But I do think that the players they've got at both ends of the pitch, I do think just deliver a bit more and just kind of bridge that gap a little bit. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. To kind of bridge the performance gap by just delivering. And at the end of the day, that's what you need to do to win football matches. You know, you need to score goals, and at the opposite end of the field, you need to prevent them. And I think Brighton are probably a perfect example of that. A good performing team, but at both ends of the pitch, they're not winners. At the end of the day, they're not really inclined to deliver. Hence why they're near the bottom of the table.
I just want to add on that point because I thought it was really interesting when you said about you know, tending to deliver and you know, going on to win games and things. I think going back to the kind of mentality aspect, it's really interesting that I'm just looking at it now. They've conceded the first goal of the game 8 times out of the 17 matches, which is really high. And we've talked about this in the past about how it does influence results. Certainly puts you on the back foot. But no team has picked up more points after conceding first. They've picked up 18 points. So they basically conceded first in 8 matches, won 6 and lost 2. I do think that's quite that's a mentality thing, that, you know, going behind and having the kind of mindset to not, you know, maybe dwell on it or whatever terms you want to use, just basically coming back into the game and having like ambitions to not only, you know, recover a result but go on and win it. It's just little things that kind of can be these little minor details that can be the difference between, you know, being like the top 5 team and maybe pushing for that top 2 position.
It's a mentality thing, but I think it's also a you know, having solutions, having ways around certain problems. Because I think this season Liverpool haven't really been as good at getting around a problem when they concede first. And I'd put Liverpool's mentality right up there with the very best. But just in terms of finding that goal, like if you look at what United can do when they need a goal, they haven't really suffered many injuries this season. And if they need a goal, you know, you've got Bruno Fernandes, you've got Paul Pogba, Martial, Cavani, Rashford, Greenwood, Van der Beek, and a potential set piece with like Maguire. So you have got goals in that team, and it is one of them that I think maybe less so compared to other games, other opponents that Liverpool faced this season. I don't think the entirety of this comes down to, you know, who scores first. I think this is going to be a 90-minute contest for me. But one interesting little note to do with the fixture: this is actually the first time Liverpool have faced Bruno Fernandes' version of Man United, which seems quite surprising, really, considering he's been there just under a year now. But Liverpool obviously haven't faced United once yet this season, even though it's January. And last time around, when they brought him in, I think Liverpool just faced United, so it's kind of had a year there, and he has made quite a difference, hasn't he, since he's moved there? The outlook at Old Trafford is completely different compared to just before he arrived. Solskjaer's now appears safe in the job, whereas beforehand he was kind of hanging on in a way. But, you know, what are your thoughts on Fernandes? Because I think this is probably the most dangerous player Liverpool have faced. Probably the most dangerous United player Liverpool have faced for quite a few years now, I'd say.
Yeah, he's been, you know, pretty much a transformational signing, hasn't he, really? if you think of the creative plays that United's had before they arrived, you've got obviously Pogba, who is a really good player, but there's always kind of question marks about his, best position on the pitch. And he really seems to do it over a prolonged period for me, Pogba. He kind of does it in stages, fits and scoffs type thing. So you got Pogba, you got Juan Mata, who's way beyond his best at this stage. And you got like a Lingard, Jesse Lingard, who we know he hasn't really got any real output. So there wasn't really that creative spark in the team. The main form of attack, and it did work to an extent in a lot of fixtures, was pace. Through the likes of Martial and Rashford and Daniel James to a lesser extent, but that's not. You can't always play with pace and win games. And now they've brought in a serious output merchant. Someone who makes things happen. He attempts tons of passes into penalty area. Loads of through balls. He takes loads of shots. He's a danger from set pieces. He's completely changed the attack. And I know his numbers were really good when he was in Portugal. But there was obviously question marks about whether he'd be able to replicate them in the Premier League. And you'd have to say 12 months in now, he's even with the pattern of taking penalties, he's proven that he can.
He just does stuff that matters. I think that's what I really like about him. I must admit, even though he's a United player, I am a big fan of his, because when I watch him play, I can't help thinking about the value that he's adding on the pitch. You can look at how many times he loses the ball and stuff like that, but if you actually look at him as a player, he's not the strongest. He's not particularly quick. Players of his mould, maybe I've kind of been bullied a little bit in England. Or maybe drifted into irrelevance almost. But Fernandes does stuff that just matters, stuff that matters in terms of winning, just delivering results. The passes he tries, the shots he takes, the moments he provides, stepping up for penalties and scoring them, taking set pieces and stuff like that. Just things that get you over the line, things that matter. Bruno Fernandes has followed him. And I think... We did mention this sort of thing when he signed, and I recall us saying, it's going to be interesting to see how this player fares, because he does kind of do everything, and he fair play to him. He's done exactly that since he came. I think United have let him do that by giving him all the set pieces and giving him the number 10 slot and stuff like that. So I think he's been given the surroundings roughly that he had in Portugal. But yeah, he's just one of the most dangerous players in the league, and I think if we use, there's a number of different statistics we can use to capture his influence, and I've used 2 of them specifically for the newsletter. Those 2 I'm going to keep for the newsletter, and I'm not going to mention in this podcast now. But if we use StatsBomb's shot creating actions, which are the 2, I'm going to get a definition. So the 2 offensive actions directly leading to a shot, such as passes, dribbles, drawing fouls. So Fernandes, in terms of shot creating actions per 90, this season, top of the league is Jack Grealish with 7 per 90. Then Kevin De Bruyne with 6.2 per 90. And then Bruno Fernandes with 5.7. Liverpool don't actually have a player until you get to 19th. And then you've got Sadio Mane. But yeah, I think it's probably one of them. It's probably an approach whereby if Liverpool stop Fernandes from playing, you're probably doing a lot in terms of taking care of the results. Obviously, it wasn't the case last night against Burnley. Pogba ended up stepping up. But I do think if you take care of Fernandes, you do a lot towards delivering a win.
Yeah, at very least, I think you'll unsettle the attack a little bit. But what I will say is, I think that's easier said than done, because he's the type of player who just has this ability to make things happen. If it's not going his day, he can kind of just pop up from nowhere. And I think a lot of that does come down to that that almost relentless willingness to try and create things, make things happen. You talked about how many times he gives the ball away and stuff. I haven't got them to hand, but his passing numbers will probably be, relatively poor. Well, certainly lower than what people would expect, but it's because he's someone who just tries so much, so many kind of high risk, high reward type passes that eventually they end up being worthwhile and rewarding.
Yeah, I was just going to add then that I think he loses the ball. Last time I checked, I think he loses the ball roughly 25% of the time when he's on it. So a quarter of the time he's on the ball, it results in a turnover.
Yeah, but that's that these turnovers are obviously happening higher up the pitch with less risk, and it's part and parcel of his game, isn't it? It's like Trent's numbers, passing numbers aren't always great, but we touched on that before. It's because you're trying to make things happen, and those passes that are successful will be so much more valuable than having a pass success rate of 96%, but it's all safe and secure. I think that's worth pointing out. Sometimes it can be a little bit misleading. You see it and you think, he gives the ball away a lot. It's not giving the ball away. It's chance creation, isn't it? And inevitably it won't always come off. But he's just one of those players, I think, who just has that in his locker.
I mean, how did Liverpool take care of this? How did Liverpool take care of this player, considering he's clearly a danger? Liverpool will be aware, probably from a numerical perspective, of how much value he's adding. I'm sure that goes into Liverpool scouting reports and all that sort of stuff. So, how do you take care of this player? I assume Liverpool will use some form of 4-3-3, considering that would offer a lone six defensive midfielder type who can kind of occupy the same space that Fernandes wants to. Maybe there's been the odd shout of a 4-2-3-1, whereby Liverpool will use a double pivot and maybe get two players occupying Fernandes in a way, I suppose. But it probably is one of them that you do have to, in some way, even though it's at Anfield, you do have to, in some way, cater for the threat that he's going to offer, and you have to kind of put a ceiling on it. At least you have to limit it.
Yeah, it is hard, and the thing is as well, because of that, the way you said United have basically given him everything, because he's got that freedom in the side. He can basically pop up anywhere. Like we're talking about, potentially putting two in the middle, in between the midfield and the defence. But the reality is, he could be coming short into the left back early, a right back. He's really difficult to track, and I don't know if maybe the answer is to almost try and man-mark him in the game. But I've seen teams try and do that this year, and like what happened with Burnley, focusing so much on him creates spaces for other really good players that United have to expose, dropping into those spaces that are vacated. So it is a little bit of a headache. It's a tough one, I think, tactically to plan for, and a player who's quite difficult to kind of prepare and defend against.
Yeah, one thing that's difficult to do when it comes to man-marking him, one way he gets around it, he releases the ball so quickly that you can't man-mark him permanently, because sometimes the opposing, you will have the ball. So if you have the ball, it's going to be pointless man-marking Bruno Fernandes. So, but then if you lose the ball and Bruno receives the ball seconds before he's about to start getting man-marked again, as I said, he releases it so quickly. Usually quality, but with quick players running them behind, the likes of Rashford and stuff. It's difficult to keep a lid on him for 90 minutes. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Dave. What would you do in terms of Liverpool's centre-back pairing and Liverpool's midfield 2/3? Have you got any thoughts on that? Assuming Matip is fit, because I think he might be.
Well, I think if they are, I think it's probably the most. I don't know.
Like, are you going Henderson centre half, or are you going Williams? Mind you, I suppose if Matip's playing, you could go Matip, Fabinho.
Fabinho, yeah. I just think I wasn't sure if you were lining up though that Fabinho's such a miss in the midfield. But I think that of those two, that's got to be just from what we've seen so far, because Fabinho doesn't really look out of place as a centre back, and we know Matip's a really good player. He just can't stay fit. The midfield's difficult because I did think specifically in that Southampton game, the right side looked a bit of an issue. With, was it Oxlade-Chamberlain, Josh, who played over that side?
Yeah, who I must admit seems to be struggling a little bit of like. It's understandable given he was out for such a long period, but in terms of getting your rhythm back, that looks like a problem for him at the minute.
I'd be inclined maybe to go Henderson, Thiago, and Wijnaldum, just because I think Wijnaldum does a lot of hard work off the ball on the other side, and obviously Henderson in there as well. I think that's probably my personal best midfield if we're playing three.
Yeah, I would agree on that with Matip and Fabinho as the two centre halves. Hopefully, I'm assuming you would have Thiago at the base.
Yeah.
See, Thiago up against Bruno would be.
Is that something that would that worry you? By the way, off the ball, Thiago kind of his work off the ball, or would you be quite confident?
No, I think I'd be quite confident. I think I've said before on this podcast. I think Thiago's off the ball work, Thiago's defensive work is quite underrated. I don't think he's one of those passengers. I don't think he's a luxury type that you need to carry and you need to partner with, a doggish type player who's going to put his foot in. I think Thiago's got a little bit of that about him, and I think obviously he's played at the highest level. He's played against top number 10s and stuff. I think he'll cope relatively well, but it's just keeping a presence around him for the whole game. But I think Henderson, Wijnaldum, and Thiago do offer a lot of defensive stability in addition to what they're offering on the ball.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about Fernandes there in terms of his quick thinking. I think what Liverpool would benefit from if they do have Thiago there is when the ball is turned over, he can get the ball so much quicker up to Liverpool's forwards, can't they? And you'd imagine, you're probably going to see United sitting in for large periods, but I think this is one of the few times where we've spoken the last couple of weeks that Liverpool's fixtures have lacked that competitive edge a little bit. It's very much been attack versus defence. I think this game will be, at least in comparison to those, a bit more open. I think with it being a little bit more open and Liverpool's attackers having that little bit more space, having Thiago able to hit them with kind of pinpoint passes very quickly when possession's turned over, I think that could play into Liverpool's hands a little bit.
I mean, one thing I was going to mention on that, I mean, that's a little bit further down in the talk, but I think what I was going to mention on that was I still don't think United are at that stage, or whether they will ever be at that stage under Solskjaer, whereby if they come up against a top opponent, I don't think there'll be any kind of struggle for dominance. I think they're more than happy with kind of allowing Liverpool to almost assume what would be the alpha role in the game, and United just kind of picked them off. And I think Solskjaer's been more than happy using a tactical approach of that nature since he got the job in various big games. And I think especially with this one being A, no fans, and B, away from home against the champions, I think he'll be well aware that he's well within his rights to use a setup like that. I'm not sure Martial will be fit. I think he came off last night, didn't he, with a problem. So he's lost a little bit of pace there, but I know against Leeds a few weeks back he used Daniel James, who's quick purely for his transitions and stuff.
Well, whilst I agree, I do, and that's why I mentioned I expect them to sit in for large periods. The point I'm trying to make is, I'm looking at the possession stats over the last few weeks, and I mean Villa, you don't really count. That was 83%, but you look like Newcastle 73, West Brom 76. It was like close to 68 Southampton. I do expect it to be maybe more of a 60-40 split. I expect United to want to maybe just, and that's not kind of impose themselves. I just expect it to be a little bit more open because I think United might commit with more men in attack. And as I said, when it's turned over, that's the moments where I think Liverpool might have rare kind of transition periods in which to attack that they never really, had previously. Kind of like what happened against City last year, where they seemed to score. Was the Salah header? I think where it's kind of been switched from side to side and then crossed into the box. I just wonder if there'll maybe be a couple more of those moments which they haven't really had over the last few weeks.
It'll be interesting to see what Klopp does with players like say for example, Wan-Bissaka in particular, because he's a player who, depending on the opposing manager, you could assume the perspective of, we want Wan-Bissaka to have the ball because he's not gonna, because we feel safe when he's on the ball. He's not gonna cause us any particular problems or that sort of stuff. From Liverpool's perspective, specifically Klopp, I'm thinking Wan-Bissaka might be used as some kind of trigger, some kind of the player that we kind of push possession towards before forcing him into a mistake because he's not that good on the ball, basically, because he kind of panics a little bit. But there's two ways you can approach Wan-Bissaka and players like that. I think specifically United's fullbacks, but mainly Wan-Bissaka. They're not the strongest, and obviously they're getting marked anyway by the touchline. So if you can force them into mistakes or just allow them the ball, knowing that they're not particularly dangerous, there's two ways of looking at
that. Yeah, it's interesting, Wan-Bissaka. He hasn't quite turned out, I think, the player that maybe they thought they were buying, although I'm not really sure what they thought they were doing in terms of the recruitment there. But yeah, he's a player who's quite good without the ball, but he is a little bit one-footed. And one thing I will say is I've noticed, looking at the numbers over the last few years, that Solskjaer has definitely implemented a more possession-based approach. The hair goes a lot shorter now with his passes out. With goal kicks as well. Whether this will stay against Liverpool, I don't know, but there is going to be opportunities to press, and you may be able to force United into mistakes doing that.
So, in terms of United's numbers, then we haven't really touched on them yet beyond the goal difference stuff. They're currently 5th in the league for shots per 90. For expected goals per 90, they're also 5th, and if you remove penalties, their XG drops to 6th. So on that, we have to talk about it. There'll probably be plenty of fans screaming at us for the half hour that we've been recording so far to talk about the penalties that they win. And this is generally a topic I try to avoid because I just hate talking about it. I hate talking about penalties and looking at referees and stuff like that. I like looking at performances, but they do win a fair amount. And it got to a point last week where, rightly or wrongly, Klopp actually shined a little bit of a light on it and said that something like they've won since the beginning of last season, they've won double the amount or something like that. What are your thoughts on United winning penalties, Dave?
I haven't got any major insights on this. I think
it's a big talking point with the Liverpool fan base.
No, I've seen it. Yeah, I've people tried to drag me into it, but whenever I try and have a conversation, I try and add some sort of insight, and I haven't really got any on this. I've looked into the kind of touches in the box stuff and tried to compare it, to see maybe if United are just naturally taking so many more touches in the penalty area, then inevitably maybe that's leading to more fouls. But they're not really. It's similar numbers to kind of what Liverpool and City are doing. Each of those teams have also got pacey attackers like United have. I think
just on that,
yeah.
Just on that, on a per 90 basis, United are currently 7th in the league for touches in the box per match. That is obviously, I shouldn't have said per 90, should have said per match really. But they average about 26 touches in the boxes per match in the box per match, which is level with Brighton. So joint 6th, I should have said really. Liverpool top of the league, 35.5 touches in the box per match, but I completely get it. I get that point, but I'm not entirely sure you can solely look at that. And I think the issue I've got with this, maybe I've got too much faith in referees, but the issue I've got with this is that is the narrative where people kind of think it's a refereeing bias, and United are just favoured by referees, and I've never really, surely not. You know what I mean? I just can't get on board with that one just because of how unlikely it feels. I think it's more likely for me at least to be, if you look at United's attacking players compared to Liverpool's attacking players, I think United's attackers are more likely to go down upon a challenge, with the exception of maybe Salah. But I think if you look at the likes of Martial, I think Martial is just simply put, I think he's better at selling it. I think he's better at selling fouls than Liverpool's attacking players are. I can't remember the last time Firmino tried to buy a foul in the box. Sadio Mane generally is up for a bit of a scrap and doesn't tend to try to buy any. So it's only really Salah whoever wins any penalties for Liverpool, whereas I think United's attack, Bruno can win one. Rashford comfortably
When you say
wins a
win
few.
one, Josh, are you saying what accusation are you leveling at the attackers there?
I just mean in terms of putting the referee in a position whereby he has to make a decision. So if you feel contact, go down. And I think Liverpool players are just maybe a bit more inclined to not do that and to just play on, rightly or wrongly. But I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, this is the thing. I'm sure loads of people have got a theory, but I think a lot of it will be centered around a favouritism to United, and I just don't feel like I can add that much on the subject. I agree. I don't think it is that, but I do also think they've been a little fortunate in parts. But that's kind of the nature of penalties now that are awarded. Maybe there is an issue in football at the moment where kind of insinuating fouls or going down a lot easier is being rewarded more than it should be, and we might see that change over the next few months. I don't know. As I said, it's a difficult one to comment on. The only good thing I would say from a Liverpool perspective is, even though it feels like it happens every week for Manchester United, penalties on the whole, I say this, aware that people will be laughing, but on the whole, they shouldn't be sustainable. So it shouldn't just keep happening over and over. So if a team is benefiting massively from, goals from penalties like United have, the chances are that's not going to last. I mean, Leicester haven't particularly.
Yeah.
Leicester were benefiting massively to start the season, weren't they? And it all looked rosy for them, and the penalties had dried up a little bit, and so was both the goals and the form. So maybe there's something that Liverpool fans can look at, and hopefully United will follow that same trend.
Yeah, the only reason I've mentioned it is because I suppose it is a slight concern ahead of the game, because that feels like one of the ways in which Liverpool could lose this match. Obviously, with it being the Anfield record as well, it'd be horrible to lose it to Manchester United. Losing this and the gap in the table going to 6 points and it being a penalty, it'd be hard to take.
You know what? I have not at any point until you just said that considered that a defeat would mean that Liverpool's 6 points behind United, and that's same games, isn't it?
Yeah, that would be same games. Yeah, I haven't really thought about it much, to be honest, but yeah, I felt the need to mention the penalties. But please do not barricade the comments section of this with your opinion on the penalties, because it's not really what this podcast is about. We look beyond that sort of stuff. We look at performances. Penalties just happen. I'm not really too bothered by them. If they happen, they happen. You need to find a way around it. And hopefully one won't impact the Liverpool game this weekend too much. I've seen a few stats surrounding, I think it's Paul Tierney who's doing the game, and I think he's given United a penalty in 5 of his last 10 games doing them, or something like that, and he's done the last 14 of Liverpool's games. He hasn't given Liverpool a single one. So these narratives are starting already in that book.
I can see it going the other way.
Hopefully it does.
Might get one, yeah.
Hopefully it does, but yeah, it's a combo that I felt we had to have, but I didn't enjoy that then. Don't know what you did.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, so in terms of their numbers on the defensive side, they're actually 10th in the league for shots faced per 90. So comfortably mid-table in terms of preventing your opponents from taking shots. And their expected goals against per 90, excluding penalties, actually places them 11th. So I think from the perspective of Liverpool's attack, that probably offers a fair bit of hope, and probably more hope than people were aware of, because that's a mid-table defence. And it's quite weird as well, because I remember we spoke last season about United. Last time we previewed United, I recall us saying that the defence is good, because everyone was criticising, Maguire, and suggesting that they need a new centre-back and all that sort of stuff. And it, those accusations might have been true, but United's numbers last season, I recall being quite strong. This season, they're not as good, and maybe those numbers suggest that Liverpool are going to get 1 or 2 openings.
Yeah, I think they will. That's you're looking basically at it based on performances. You're looking at a kind of mid-table defense, aren't you? So against the mid-table defense, Liverpool are going to create chances. It's just whether they'll take them in this kind of form that they're in at the moment, I guess.
I think one final aspect that I want to touch on, one slight concern maybe from my side, is I don't think Trent has been in particularly great form. I think he got a bit of criticism in his last game. And he, especially if Martial's out, Trent will be up against a player who's roasted him in the past on I think more than one occasion in Marcus Rashford. That doesn't bode particularly well for Liverpool. Obviously, it will be compensated a lot by Matip's presence. If Matip plays, that'll help a lot. But regardless, Rashford does tend to have the better of Trent whenever he plays him. And sometimes Pogba's played on that left of United's attack, depending on where every other player is, basically. Pogba's obviously come out of a good game there in form. So I think just a little bit of a slight concern as to the left of United's attack compared to the right of Liverpool's defence. But I suppose we could level that with the return of Matip, the return of Henderson to the right of Liverpool's midfield. Probably does, battle against that a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think he's a little bit better protected. I think it's weird with Trent because I don't think he's fantastic defensively. We've said before that he almost not gets away with it because he's certainly not that bad by any stretch, but because of his attacking output, it's why he maintains that position, undoubtedly, without any question. But yeah, it's not the strongest part of his game, the defensive side. But then he also defends in a really difficult position, in a difficult side. I know that seems ludicrous, but often when teams kind of create chances against Liverpool, it tends to be on the break, doesn't it? When the team's out of shape, Liverpool normally on attack and possession is turned over, and teams just first thought they don't want to maintain possession. They want to quickly get the ball forward and try and create something. So that means he's often defending, in transitions, and that's really difficult because you're not in the shape that you plan for. You can't really practice defending in transition. It's really hard. And I think that makes him look a little bit worse than perhaps he is sometimes. But that being said, it doesn't negate from the point that you're making, Josh, that that matchup on paper does look quite difficult, and it will be important that the likes of Henderson and Matip are all around him and adding that support in the moments that he'll need it.
So, all things considered then, what is your verdict? What are you expecting here?
See, I'm going to be the positive one here. I mean, I'm aware that we've been tipping Liverpool to win through this terrible run every time. And maybe this seems like the game on paper to go against something else. But I just think, especially if they start the game week as low as 6th, which is possible, they're certainly going to start it not top of the table. I think this is just a little bit of the motivation Liverpool needs. Suddenly Liverpool aren't the ones being chased; they're chasing the game. And whenever they've come up against the big sides and the big games, they've always found another gear. And I expect that to happen again tonight. I think Sunday. I think bizarrely there's a little bit of pressure on United, because this is their opportunity to try and legitimise their kind of credentials as title contenders, and that means they can't just go there and get beat and carry on the season. If they lose this, it'll feel like it's all a bit of a farce. And, and for that reason, I think they're going to be desperate to get some sort of result. So I'm going to go with a 2-1 Liverpool win.
I'm struggling with this one. I find it quite tricky to preview. I see United's threat, and I see, obviously, Liverpool's threat. Liverpool's level, in my opinion, is by far and away above United's. But lately it hasn't been. Lately I've struggled to put my finger on why. Lately as well, we just don't seem to have been at the races, and obviously we've faced bad teams really, and I suppose that could be a reason behind it. You know, you mentioned there that Liverpool tend to do quite well against good sides. I've just got up Liverpool's expected goals this season, just in every game. And the top 5 teams for Liverpool this season in terms of XG, against Leicester, against Leeds, against Arsenal, against Atalanta, and against Chelsea. They're all decent teams, you know, fairly well coached for the most part, some of them. So, you know, I think you're right there in terms of Liverpool stepping up when he needs to. So if Liverpool step up, I feel like I need to caveat, if Liverpool step up when he needs, like they need to, this could be a fairly dominant performance. But lately, you know, Liverpool aren't doing that. So I'm finding it tricky to put a verdict on this one. I think I'm gonna go a bit more reserved than usual. I don't think Liverpool will win. I don't think United will win. I don't think Liverpool are going to lose this one. But I think I'm going to go 1-1, with the possible caveat again of your 2-1 being entirely possible if Liverpool actually turn up. And Liverpool in this game, I've got no reason not to turn up. We've had a few days off. We're now dropping down the table. Our arch rivals have taken the top spot. They're coming to our home, Anfield. You know, it's a huge game, so Liverpool should turn up. If they do, a win is entirely possible, but just based on what's happening lately, I think I'm going to side with 1-1, but hopefully I'm wrong. I'm more than happy to be wrong on this one.
Hopeful to be wrong, even.
Yeah, yeah. I've never wanted to be wrong more in my life. But yeah, we'll round up there anyway. So hopefully Liverpool pick a win. We'll be back next week. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, everyone.
And yeah, we'll see you next week.